Hi, this is James, and for today's video, I'm talking about music as usual, but more specifically, how I believe it will continue, or at the very least, how people who want to be involved should start to assess their involvement in it. And I want to begin by talking about how a frequent comment made by people is that the ideal system is a patron system. For a patron system, I think it's easiest to explain for those who might not know, like a Medici family system where there are groups of people or the government in some cases that will subsidize an art scene and make it entirely publicly accessible. Think of murals for visual arts or a publicly funded exhibition. And what this does is it makes art not only accessible, but it pays artists well. It's sort of the opposite of the current system in music, which is very few big individual patrons, and rather it's a bunch of really small patrons or people incidentally being patrons by streaming something and giving a few cents to it. Now, of course, the cynic in me wants to point out that the current system is not sustainable. It is not. It has killed any semblance of a music middle class to upper middle class, something reasonably aspirational to, and instead has created a boomer bust mentality that has infected people to an extent where it's almost like wanting to be a pro athlete is wanting to make it in music. That's sort of the mentality where it's like, if you're not one of the top elite people, you're not having any real impact, when in reality, that's not how any art should be viewed. And one solution that I would say was very popular in the 2010s that people suggested was syncing. Music syncing for film, TV, and games, because they pay big for an artist to make a song, or if they want to use a song that's already out there, they will pay you very well. A lot of times, a standard can be something like a $50,000 payment. I don't want to demean that, but it is not sustainable and not realistic for every artist. I mean, what do we expect, like film production companies to be financing half of the music industry? Like, that's not going to happen. How many placements are we going to require artists to get to, in order to feel like they're really making it in the industry? I mean, it's absurd. Are they supposed to be in multiple big budget pictures with a big song or an original song for a game like at least once a year? Like, that's just not realistic. And the way in which purchasing music, which is already sort of an odd framework, purchasing music, it removes a lot of experience, but it's done at a micro level, either through streaming or even through an iTunes purchase or whatever it is. It's not a real pathway. It's too subjective in the sense of an artist's worth is determined by their ability to be convincing to purchase, instead of what does the art signify and what does it mean, and is it additive to the human experience? And the other thing is that it also means that people interpret this as needing everything to be landmark. And one thing that's really difficult to grapple with as artists is like a lot of the best stuff out there that you have put all this meaning into, the creator probably didn't hold the same meaning with. Not that people who create art aren't making stuff that's meaningful to them. Rather, a lot of times the way an artist views what they're making is not the same way that it's received. What's viewed as someone's magnum opus and what it means to you is completely detached from the artist's intent. And to sort of, I guess, like make up for that, a lot of artists try to do a magnum opus with everything they do in order to stand out or have significance right now. And it's not leading to a lot of great art. And the craziest part of all of this is it sounds like this would be, like leading to the classic, like, monoculture argument where it's like, oh, and the people at the very top are the only ones benefiting, they're the ones that are making all these money off people because they've just arbitrarily made it to a certain echelon. And that's not even the case anymore. Even the top artists, generally speaking, aren't getting paid their worth unless they sell their catalog, which is ludicrous and a ridiculous thing to have to consider as an artist. I mean, The Weeknd just did a strange deal where he sold a quarter of his catalog, which was divided a certain way, for $250 million or something like that. And what that implies is that The Weeknd current evaluation of his work is $1 billion, but he's going to hold on to 3/4 of his work so that it will grow in value over time. It's insane. It's insane, and it's absurd to calculate art in this way. Whereas Under a patron system, which many people support, it's like you get the initial payment for the work. It's more meritocratic and it's more sustainable. However, just because it sustains doesn't mean it's the ideal. And I really want to clarify that even under these systems, like a patron system, it leaves a lot of room for negative stuff. Even if you're, having patrons of music specifically, it's like people still look to touring and fan interaction for the bulk of their revenue, really. And right now, what we've seen is like the rise in ticket prices haven't aligned with a rise in tickets sold. And in fact, like we've seen a lot fewer tickets sold, a lot of relatively empty stadiums for big tours for artists. The blue dot epidemic, as some call it. It really shows that it's like people shouldn't be having to outsource all their revenue to things that require an exploitation of fans. It's just not realistic. The other proposed solution of having, 1,000 diehard fans that are willing to spend at least $100, on your work, then you're making $100,000 as an artist and you only have 1,000 real diehard fans. But that's absurd because it's like, who wants to spend $100 on their favorite artist a year for multiple art? Like you maybe will do that for one. Maybe. And that's talking about like directly funding them, like a public grassroots funding, except you're expecting so much out of people. Like it's not realistic. And it also requires music to be facilitated by people with financial means, which immediately causes a whole other ethical question. And I feel like it requires in the current system, assuming that it's not going to switch to some patron system overnight or some sort of like mythically, ethically safe, like it's not real, right? It's not real. I'm not saying that in a cynical way. It's just like you can be an idealist and want to work towards something, but at the same time, it's like you can't just deny the reality in which you live in. And I was reading this Substack article and it's melodramatic. It's like you should give up on your creative dreams. Obviously, it's an embellished title, but shout out to the article. I don't love some of the phrasing in it. I think it's a little arrogant at times. However, there's a lot of good in there. And one of the things that is pointed out in there is that like T.S. Eliot worked a normal job. A lot of the people who we view as exceptional not only weren't recognized in their time, but it wasn't even what they spent a bulk of their time doing. The majority of these artists' time wasn't spent just sitting around thinking of ideas for their work. That's a mythologized perception of who these people were based off of a completely subjective understanding of who these people were based on their public work. So it's like, what do people expect in the current system? Do they really believe in the boom or bust working for them? Like, it kind of makes me sad when people firmly believe that, when it's like, it's a lottery system. It's a lottery system. I'm not saying no one makes it. Obviously, people make it. People make it every day. There should be an understanding that as many people as there are who succeed, there's more that don't succeed. And not all of these people are making bad music. That's the thing that people associate. That's just not true. The idea that the people who don't succeed are making bad art is ridiculous. I mean, was it Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick and like barely sold copies? And like, not saying that Moby Dick is like the best thing out there, but the fact that it's like regarded as like the great American novel and it wasn't even really successful in the guy's lifetime. I mean, like, what are we talking about? Unless you personally believe you can change the landscape itself and that your success will be so different than everyone else's, you should build your life in a way to where you're able to create art in the way that you want to create it. Make music the way you want to. Don't compromise. People think of compromise as not being fully devoted to the music. But the ultimate compromise is making music that's not entirely authentic because you want it to fit in the current cultural landscape a certain way. That's compromise. And there's dignity in not making it and doing other things with your life. There's so much dignity in that. Whereas there's not like the same dignity in just blindly pursuing something under the guise that you're some artistic visionary, and of course people will recognize your work in your lifetime, instead of trying to make something that like you can still live a decent life and be authentic and make good things. And like, I know I've praised the Renaissance artist, you know what I mean, like some Renaissance man who does everything. I don't really like the term Renaissance man. Regardless, I know I've talked about this on this channel and on my Substack, but I really want to emphasize that it's like the reason why I praise it is because it works for the few who are able to do it. Not everyone should do it. And it's not a comment on talent or skill or quality even, as much as why would someone devote themselves to pursuing something that they don't really want themselves? Like, how many artists really want to be fashion designers? Like, you can care about clothes and fashion without wanting to be a designer. The idea that you need to be a fashion designer to like sell to your fans is absurd if that's not something you genuinely care about or want to be. And the solution is not simple. Maybe it's because I'm reading Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse, but it's being like a multifaceted person. And it doesn't mean compartmentalizing everything as much as it means understanding yourself through the context of the time you're in and recognizing different needs. There's not just one singular need. It's different. And there's not just you as an artist. There's you as a person who you don't understand. No one really like fully conceptualizes the self in its entirety, right? Because it's too split. It's too different. There's 1,000 different things going on at once at all times. And not only that, it's amorphous. There's not just the singular true self you're going to comprehend and then everything's going to be fine. It's changing. You can prep for all sorts of different things. Facilitate as much that you can, Don't pursue a arbitrary goal because it's how you conceptualize how exceptional people of the past were, and you want to emulate that. You want to break big like your heroes did, and it makes you want, like, why? Because is the appeal living out a dream that someone didn't have? The people who initially broke big usually talk about how, like, being that level of success, like, it affects their lives in negative ways. Maybe you can, focus on satisfying multiple needs. I know this is, like, obnoxious to hear someone like me say, because I know I'm young, right? Like, I don't have enough experience. However, I do think it's important to have, I guess, like a discussion like this online, because I don't think there's a lot of outlets being forward with this because they want to romanticize their own life decisions, right? How many articles are written by music journalists trying to justify the way in which they're music journalists instead of just talking about music and art and leaving their personal stuff aside? Everyone wants to be like a revolutionary, and in the process immediately makes themselves not a revolutionary and just play into a scheme that's outside of their control. Arts flourish when you have the freedom to do what you want to do. So don't limit yourself in that way. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you want. I have music, but I have better stuff on the way. Maybe an artist change. Who knows what's going to happen right now? I don't.